Well, good evening, everyone. Good evening. I'm so excited to be here tonight for our wonderful panel discussion of the U.S. occupation of Haiti and the long-term effects. So we're really excited to have some great panelists tonight. And I don't get the opportunity to introduce them, but I do get to introduce Dr. Sharon Austin. But I want to get a head start and thank all of our sponsors that made this possible, which is the NEH, the National Endowment of Humanities. We want to thank our Florida Department of Cultural Arts and the African American Preservation Network. All of these people are the ones that allowed us to be able to do these programming, and we're so grateful to them. And of course, I wouldn't do a shameless plug if I wouldn't be able to do that, but I'm going to do that. That the Haitian Heritage Museum is actually turning 20 years old in the next 4 days. We were actually established on March the 3rd, 2004 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of Haiti's independence. So we're really excited about our programming this year, and we're looking forward to doing a lot more programming and really sharing our institution with the world. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Dr. Sharon Austin right now. So Dr. Sharon Austin is a professor of political science at the University of Florida. Her research focuses on African American women's political behavior, African American mayoral elections, rural African American political activism, African American political behavior. She is the author of Race, Power, and Political Emergence in Memphis, The Transformation of Plantation Politics in the Mississippi Delta, Black Politics, Concentrated Poverty, and Social Capital in the Mississippi Delta State. State University of New York Press, The Caribbeanization of Black Politics, Race, Group Consciousness, and Political Participation in America. Beyond Radical Capitalism, Cooperatives in the African Diaspora, and she co-edited with Carolyn Shanez, Hussein, and Kevin Edmonds, and most recently, Political Black Girl Magic, the election and the governance of Black female mayors. She has also published several books, chapters, and articles, and is a member of the American Political Science Review editorial team. Her Twitter handle is at Sharon, A as in Apple, 8270758. So please give it up for Dr. Sharon Austin, and she's going to take it away.
Hello, everyone. I want to first of all introduce our two distinguished guests, and then I'll just go ahead and ask some questions. I'll make a few comments about the U.S. occupation of Haiti, but I know that the audience mostly wants to hear from the panelists, so I'll be as brief as possible. And then after about 30 minutes of our panel discussion, we'll take questions from the audience. And then after that, Evelyn will close us out. So I want to begin by introducing Peter James Hudson. He is currently an associate professor of geography at the University of British Columbia. He is the author of Bankers and Empire, How Wall Street Colonized the Caribbean, that was published by the University of Chicago Press in 2017. His essays, reviews, and commentaries have appeared in Black Agenda Report, Boston Review, Haiti Liberty, Small Acts, Radical History Review, Race and Class, and other venues. Professor Hudson is also an editor of the Black Agenda Review, the Political Education Supplement of the Black Agenda Report, and he is a member of the Haiti Americas Committee of the Black Alliance for Peace. Our second panelist tonight will be David Kilroy. He is a professor of history and chair of the Department of Humanities and Politics at Nova Southeastern University. He has published 2 books. The first is For Race and Country, The Life and Career of Colonel Charles Young, that was published in 2003 by Prager. The second, Days of Decision, Turning Points in U.S. Foreign Policy, was published by Potomac Press in 2011. He has also written a number of reviewed articles and essays on topics related to the history of U.S. foreign relations. So those are our 2 panelists that I'll be asking questions of tonight. And I just want to say just a few things about the U.S. occupation of Haiti, and I'm sure our panelists will have a lot more to say. But I just want to read something really quickly, just briefly, just to explain a little bit about what this was about. After the assassination, or I guess it was called the lynching, of the Haitian president by a mob that was angered by his decision to order the executions of political prisoners, in July 1915, President Woodrow Wilson sent the U.S. Marines into Haiti to restore order and maintain political and economic stability in the Caribbean. The U.S. occupation of Haiti began on July 28, 1915, when 330 Marines arrived in Port-au-Prince, and it continued until 1934. Even before this occupation, the United States was interested in Haiti's welfare, but not because of any real concern for the country or its people. They were only concerned about Haiti because it was a possible American naval base. Also, they didn't want the country to be under foreign rule, especially that of Germany. The United States considered Germany its chief rival in the Caribbean and feared that German control of Haiti would give them a powerful advantage in the region. President Woodrow Wilson also will go down in history as being one of the most racist presidents to ever serve. So it's hard to believe that he was really concerned about protecting Haiti unless the U.S. would receive some kind of benefit. The National Citibank of New York and also other American businessmen convinced President Wilson to take control of Haiti's political and financial interests. The National City Bank had funds there that they were afraid they would lose. In 1929, the United States began its withdrawal from Haiti because of several uprisings there. In 1930, U.S. officials began training Haitian officials to take control of the government. In 1934, the United States, in concert with President Franklin D. Roosevelt's Good Neighbor policy, officially withdrew from Haiti while retaining economic connections. So that tells you a little bit about what we'll be discussing tonight. And I'm sure the panelists, if I've said anything that was incorrect or that you don't agree with, then that's fine. So I'll begin now and just ask the first question. The first question is basically, what is your interpretation of what was the U.S. occupation? You can basically just tell what your opinion is as to why that happened.
Should I go first?
Yeah, Peter, you go ahead. Yeah.
All right, thank you. First of all, let me say thank you for inviting me to be a part of this presentation from the Haitian Heritage Museum. It's great to be here during Black History Month, and I think we should all recognize that Haitian history is Black history, and all Black people are absolutely indebted to what Haiti did in terms of its independence and the kind of support for Black freedom throughout the world. I should also note very quickly that today is also the 20th anniversary of the coup that removed Jean-Bertrand Aristide, and we're also on the verge of potentially another U.S. occupation of Haiti led by Kenya. So I think when we're talking about the occupation of 1915, these other anniversaries and dates should be at the back of our mind, not simply because there's historical parallels that can be drawn out as kind of footnotes, but because the occupation that we're faced with today is in many ways replicates the same conditions of the occupation of 1915. We're looking at a time when foreign powers are looking at Haiti in terms of its internal chaos. We talked about the assassination in 1914. We have the assassination of Moise, as well as the gang problem that people like to talk about. But we also have to look at the broader kind of international interests that are behind both occupations. As Sharon pointed out, obviously the United States was the primary force behind the U.S. occupation of Haiti in 1915, as they are today. But there was also concerns around Germany and around France. Now, for me, I think we can look at what the occupation is through a number of things. I think in the first instance, we're talking about the military control of Haiti by U.S. Marines and the imposition of martial law, the gagging of free speech, the terrible massacres of Haitian peasants and the repression of Haitian dissidents in order to control the economy of the island. The question of the economy is extremely important. There was huge American investments in Haitian sugar. Forces on Wall Street, including the National City Bank, wanted to control Haiti's ports, Haiti's railroads, and of course the Haitian Central Bank. And they wanted to glean that control largely from European investors, from France, but also because of the threat of Germany in the context of World War I. And the final thing I'll say, and I think, obviously we'll have time to return to some of these questions, is that we have to look at what the occupation was in terms of the strategic importance of the Caribbean during the early 20th century. We have to remember, and this brings us to Roger Farnham, who I hope we can talk a little bit more about later, was that the U.S. gained control of Panama in 1903, started building the canal, and then opened the canal in 1914. So there was a need on the part of U.S. Military and commercial interests to control the Caribbean Sea, to protect ports on the eastern coast and along the way, along through the Panama Canal to China. So part of the issue here was, how do we make sure that internal revolutions or internal strife in Haiti or in Cuba or in Jamaica do not affect U.S. Trade and traffic through the Caribbean? And importantly, the Mole St. Nicholas, which was called the Gibraltar of the Caribbean, was a really important point that the U.S. had been trying to control since the 19th century, and it's directly across from Cuba and kind of defends some of the pathways into the Caribbean Sea. So I'm going to pass it over to David in the interest of time, but thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and congratulations on your 20th anniversary. I'm delighted to be here. And I would echo a lot of what Sharon and Peter have said, right? That that the occupation of Haiti can be seen on two levels, right? Obviously, the impact on Haiti and the nature of the occupation itself, but also within those larger contexts of U.S. foreign policy and U.S. hegemonic power in the Caribbean and Central America. I think in many ways, there's a number of things that are really interesting about the Haitian occupation in that larger story, and that is that this is really an act of U.S. imperialism, right? This is part of rising American empire, right? So, late 19th century, the United States starts to flex its muscles in the Pacific and the Caribbean, most obviously in the war against Spain over Cuba in 1898. There's a brief period where the United States kind of flirts with formal empire, right? Occupying Puerto Rico, Guam, the Philippines, and there is a debate in the United States about the nature of imperialism and whether or not it's consistent with American Republican values. And I think this is in part then sees a shift in American policy because of this, I don't want to say discomfort with empire, but discomfort with this manifestation of empire, right? So, the Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine in 1904 sees a real kind of exertion of American power in the region, but it shifts from formal empire to this kind of, combination of gunboat diplomacy, marine interventions, and what becomes known as dollar diplomacy, right? The exertion of American economic power through receiverships and control of customs, bank control, and so forth. And it's not confined to the Caribbean or Central America, right? The U.S. at the same time that it intervenes in Haiti, of course, is militarily intervening in across the region, but also intervening in places like Liberia, in West Africa, trying to find a way into Turkey, into China, into any areas really where the U.S. can expand that U.S. power doesn't face direct opposition from European imperialism. And I think that's the other important context, right? That all of this takes place in the same period, and I think both Peter and Sharon have referenced this, that in the same period that the French and the Germans and the British are exerting greater and greater influence globally, right? In Africa, in Asia, in the Middle East. And so the U.S. is trying to be a player here. It's getting involved. I think in terms of Haiti itself, there is, obvious strategic interest. Mole St. Nicholas is clearly a place that the U.S. had designs on, as Peter pointed out, and there is a very strong economic interest. But to a large degree, the U.S., I think maybe overstates the importance of Haiti strategically to its own interests, and is more concerned about the larger picture of the region necessarily than Haiti as a standalone strategic location. I'm sure we'll talk about this, but obviously this has massive implications for Haiti. I think there is a direct correlation between what's happening today and what happened during the occupation, and even going further back to earlier European pressures on Haiti, the French indemnity and French efforts and German efforts to exert greater economic control in the late 19th century. So it's there's so many kind of moving parts to the story. There's a Haitian story, there's a Caribbean story. I think there's a global context as well.
All right, that leads to my next question, which you both have kind of touched on briefly a little bit. Was the U.S. occupation about restoring order and maintaining economic stability, or was it about positioning the U.S. in the region?
I think David's final comment that there's so many moving parts in this story is really useful. And one of the things that I've kind of come to grips with in my research is when we're talking about U.S. imperialism, it's sometimes not always useful to talk about U.S. imperialism as some unified thing. And so just in the context of Haiti, there's conflicts between the State Department and Wall Street, between Washington and Wall Street over what Haitian policy should look like. And obviously Wall Street has very specific economic interests, but those economic interests didn't always serve Washington's policy. And so there's always a little bit of tension there, though in the Haitian case, I think Wall Street did have an overbearing influence on Washington, largely because from what I understand and from what people like Farnham and another Citibanker, John H. Allen, claim is that people like William Bryant Jennings really knew nothing about Haiti, and so we're reliant on bankers on the ground to determine what that policy would look like. And so we then have a document called the Farnham Plan, which is a 1914 memo that Roger Farnham writes for the U.S., outlining why Haiti needs to be occupied and basically how they should go about doing it in order to restore order, to get to the question, but also in order to protect U.S. investments in Haiti. Some people would say that U.S. investments in Haiti were not that much. And I think compared to other places, you could say that's true, but they were still important. They were important to the vice presidents and presidents of Citibank, who were making money off that. But I think that so there is I think there's a very cynical way that it is the U.S. does land troops to restore order, but I think that's also to protect investments. And I think that it's also part of that larger kind of global story of dollar diplomacy that David points out. And I just want to kind of double down on that point there in case our audience doesn't really know what this means. Is the idea of dollar diplomacy is that you're going to replace diplomacy by the gun by diplomacy via finance. And so instead of just landing and occupying a country, you're going to hire private financial advisors, control customs, control tariffs, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, what we see in Haiti, dollar diplomacy ends up being gunboat diplomacy. They're one and the same thing. So there's a bit of a misnomer there. But I think that story becomes important to the general history of the occupation.
Yeah, I think the issue of the distinction between dollar diplomacy and military intervention becomes very blurred in this period, right? Not just in Haiti, but across the region, right? The advantage of dollar diplomacy from American policymakers is that it theoretically takes out of the hand of U.S. officials, the imprint of imperial oversight, but it privatizes it essentially. To a certain degree, it's a kind of a sleight of hand, and even as a term, it has limited usage, right? The U.S. is definitely trying to exert hegemonic power in the region, right? Haiti included. So in terms of whether this is more strategic or economic, I think it's a combination of both. As Peter pointed out, the Citibank in New York had direct interest here and actively engage in a kind of backdoor lobbying, right? Bryant definitely relied heavily on Farnham for insight into conditions on the ground in Haiti, and acted on his advice. And Farnham's interests were largely driven by, Citibank in New York, rather than any larger, concern for U.S. interests. Having said that, we've already pointed out the U.S. did identify strategic interests here, and I think the other point to keep in mind is this happens against the backdrop of World War I, right? The one area that the State Department cites regularly about an area of concern with regard to Haiti is growing German influence, right? And of course, the U.S. doesn't join the war until 1917, but by the time U.S. Marines land in Haiti, Germany is already clearly, in the eyes of the Wilson administration, an emerging enemy, right? Wilson's sympathies were with Britain from the get-go. Having said that, I think, as I kind of alluded to earlier, the U.S. overstated the dangers of German intervention, but it was something that was cited repeatedly by the United States. I think the other thing to keep in mind here too is with regard to motivations for the intervention, and it can't be overlooked, is the issue of race, right? This was a policy driven by racism. This was a policy, an intervention that rested on the assumption that Haiti could not function and the Haitian people couldn't function as an independent republic. And this goes all the way back to the early history of Haiti and the failure, the refusal of the United States to recognize Haiti and the racial policies racial ideology upon which U.S. foreign policy was built, right? So it's not just Haiti; it's the whole the Caribbean and Central America. There's this assumption that people of color aren't capable of good government, and the White Man's Burden, the poem "The White Man's Burden" was written about the United States intervention in the Caribbean, right? So the U.S. is acting upon that impulse. And one final point I think that makes this even more, I think complex too, is the idea of progressive foreign policy, right? This is the progressive era. This is the era of top-down management and effective government and the rule of law and so forth. And Wilson, I agree with Sharon. Wilson's, he's the first Southerner to serve as president since the Civil War, and he brings back very much a Southern mentality in terms of race and identity. But he's also progressive, right? And people like William Jennings Bryant represent very much the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. And so there's this assumption that the United States can bring quote unquote good government to the region, and so this is American exceptionalism. This is the idea that the U.S. does it better than everyone else, and that American intervention can only have good consequences.
My next question is, during the U.S. occupation of Haiti, what was the climate of U.S. politics like in the region?
I think I'd like to respond to that by talking about the kind of the economic politics and specifically through Wall Street. And I think this folds back into the larger question of dollar diplomacy and the kind of strategic questions. But I also think what's important when we talk about the U.S. occupation of Haiti is to not isolate the U.S. occupation of Haiti from other interventions that are happening throughout the region. So we have a whole series of interventions in Cuba after 1898, where U.S. troops are landed to restore stability, to prop up elections, to do all this kind of stuff through the 1920s. We have in Nicaragua, where Nicaragua at one point is called the Republic of Brown Brothers because the bank, Brown Brothers, controls Nicaragua, much the same way that Wall Street or that Citibank controlled Haiti, and Brown Brothers requested troops in Nicaragua to protect their interests there. We have a brief intervention in the Dominican Republic. We have the takeover of the U.S. Virgin Islands. We have the obviously the situation in Panama. But I think one of the things that's always been important to me in understanding Haiti is that in some ways, the Caribbean is better seen not from Havana or from Port-au-Prince, but from Wall Street. There's a quite scary way that bankers and financiers have a total sense of the region. And you have people, again, like Roger Farnham, who's not only in Haiti, but he's also in Panama. He's also in the Dominican Republic. He's also in Cuba, and he's also dictating policy in all of those places. And so I think what we need to understand is that the entire region is being kind of floated as I don't want to go so far as to say it as an American plantation, but that's pretty much the case when it comes down to it, where sugar is the primary export, and Wall Street is trying to finance sugar, and so that there's movement of Haitian labor to Cuba, Jamaican labor to Cuba to work on American sugar plantations, and those sugar plantations are being financed by and owned by Wall Street interests. So I think that one needs to really understand that broader context, and that broader vision of Wall Street, and that broader financial vision of Wall Street for the entire Caribbean region during this period.
Yeah, to echo that, I think what's happening in the region is a reflection of the emergence of the U.S. as a major global power, right? But one which exerts much of its power economically, right? And American power rests on this kind of burgeoning kind of corporate and financial power, which we see exerted first in the Americas, but come the end of World War I, you're going to see it exerted increasingly in Europe and across the Atlantic, right? So a good illustration of this perhaps is the Monroe Doctrine, right? Which the U.S. declared in 1823 as a kind of defensive measure, right? Leave us alone, Europeans, stay out of the Americas. There was a lot of bravado in it. This idea that the U.S. was the kind of old republic, the sister republic of the emerging republics of South America, but it was largely dependent upon British naval, protection in the Atlantic. As long as the British alliance sustained, the U.S. could, grow and prosper free from interference from European powers. But by the 1890s, you see, people like Richard Olney, the American Secretary of State, issue the first kind of corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, saying the U.S. is virtually sovereign in the Americas. And then, of course, Teddy Roosevelt's rewriting of the Monroe Doctrine as an assertive rather than a defensive policy, right, where he basically reserves the right to the United States to intervene wherever it sees fit to address, what he would characterize as instability or lawlessness in the region. But this all coincides with the rise of the U.S. as this major economic power, right? And this almost bursting at the seams of American, investment and finance, and that finds a field in the Americas. And during World War I, in particular, as British and German and French capital, retreats, American capital fills the vacuum, right? So it is bankers, but as Peter also already pointed out, it's sugar, it's bananas, it's AT&T across Latin America, it's cables, it's everything, right? So there is a clear correlation between the occupation of Haiti and this kind of emergent American kind of economic imperialism in the region.
If I could just add one quick point to that thing, because I think this is important in terms of the rise of American power, and I don't want us to kind of see it as something that just inevitably occurred, but it's important to realize that through the 19th century, U.S. development was really based on European financing. That it was J.P. Morgan and other U.S. banks were drawing on European banks for fund to develop the country. And as David pointed out, by the time we get to World War I, all of the European capital investments in the Americas is retreating because it's being tied up in the war. And this is the moment that Wall Street becomes the major global player, and Wall Street banks become major global players. And the US almost overnight goes from the world's largest debtor nation to the world's largest creditor nation. And that shift is important in understanding the sudden presence of Brown Brothers, of Citibank and other of the Chase Manhattan Bank in Cuba, in Haiti, in the Dominican Republic, in Nicaragua, and other places. That shift is part of a longer history of creditor-debtor relations that has its fulcrum in World War I.
Right. My next question is, Haiti became the first free Black nation in the Western Hemisphere. Do you believe the U.S. occupation had anything to do with the state of Haiti today?
I think it seems like a bit of a two-part question that you're throwing at us there, and I would say that that I think David's earlier point that we have to really understand the meaning of the occupation in terms of race is extremely important. There was the so I mean we go back to 1804, and we have to understand, yes, it's the first free Black republic in the hemisphere. We could say it's the first free republic in the hemisphere, because there is every other country in the region had not abolished slavery. But with that, it also meant that Haiti was destroyed white supremacy, or tried to destroy white supremacy in the Americas, and the kind of economic system of slavery built on the labor of Africans that was supporting white supremacy. I don't think France ever forgave Haiti for 1804. I think the US has always been afraid of Haiti since 1804, because if you destroy slavery in Haiti, and there's the contagion of that destruction that goes to Cuba, that goes to Brazil, that goes to the United States, you have white plantation owners basically losing their minds. And so you see very quickly after 1804, the kind of negative representations of Haiti as a place of cannibalism, of a place of voodoo, as a place that regresses back to African civilization, that goes back again to David's point that there's this kind of media saturation of images of Black people being unable to govern themselves. There's this sense that Haitian people do not deserve self-government and are unable to govern themselves. This persists through the 19th century. It becomes part of the narrative of occupation. It's part of the actual text of the Farnham Plan, where he says that Haiti could only be stable until once a stronger white nation basically steps in to control it. And then we see this in terms of what's happening today with the potential of bringing in foreign troops. It's this idea that the gangs, the Haitian masses need to have a kind of paternalistic force intervening there. Of course, with those narratives of Haitian self-government, no one ever will talk about, well, what is it that has put Haiti in a position where that government has been, where government has been destroyed, where the state has been hollowed out, and where Haitian people are never given actually the tools or the support internationally to show that they can and deserve to be free.
Yeah, to build upon that point, throughout the 19th century, Haiti was a reference point for Southern slave owners about the dangers of abolition. Right, this is what will happen if we end slavery in America. We'll end up like Haiti, and Haiti remained a kind of almost a bogeyman in the minds of white Southerners. But that doesn't end with the end of slavery in the United States. In fact, it kind of doubles down, because of course the abolition of slavery is followed by the emergence of Jim Crow and the economic system of sharecropping in the South, and a two-tiered society in the United States, which arguably reaches its apex during the Wilson administration in the 1920s. With the reemergence of the Klan in the U.S. and there's this kind of there's a real kind of tension in the U.S. between the emerging kind of voice of African America and the increasingly strident kind of racism of white America in the very period that the occupation is taking place. So Haiti's success is bad news for white America in the 19th century, and continues to be at the time of the occupation. A successful Haitian government means that Jim Crow is wrong, right? Means that that the U.S. is not exceptional because it doesn't pass anti-lynching laws, or it doesn't provide protections for Black citizens in the United States. And so I definitely think there's this long history of the United States basically building into its foreign policy the assumption that Haiti cannot succeed, and that it is detrimental to its interests. In terms of the long-term impact on Haiti, I think that the occupation makes the U.S. a permanent power broker in Haiti. It doesn't. The occupation ends, but the U.S. remains the arbiter of much of the future power structure in Haiti, down to this day, right? So the other point I think I'd like to make too, though, is to go back to the idea of the African American perspective, and maybe I'll talk more about this. I think in the next question I have some things to say about it. But I think one thing that's important to think about Haiti as well in this kind of more global context is that the Haitian occupation is important as a beginning point in Black resistance to not just American imperialism, but to white imperialism, right? This is really the first kind of, the Caicos uprisings and the protests in 1929. And these are among the first examples of anti-colonial resistance, right? That, of course, will, take hold in the interwar periods, particularly and once again, here you have the Wilson administration going to Paris at the end of World War I, saying that they're going to support self-determination for subject peoples, right? And it becomes patently obvious to everyone concerned that means subject white peoples in Europe, right? Not Black and brown people in Africa or in the Middle East or in the Caribbean. So it's important to see the Haitian occupation too as one of the first examples of kind of resisting that larger kind of transatlantic, if you will, Anglo-American and French imperial structure.
All right, and my final question is, who are some known and unknown figures that were instrumental to the U.S. occupation that shaped Haiti both pre and post occupation?
There's so many people that I would like to name here. I think obviously in this context and for for this museum, the figure of Roger Leslie Farnham is extremely important. I think he was born in D.C. in the late 19th century. He lived in the Midwest, traveled through Mexico, worked on cattle ranchers, then ended up as a journalist before working for the great Wall Street law firm of Sullivan and Cromwell, where he was involved in the kind of shenanigans that brought the Panama Canal under U.S. control, and then he ends up working as a kind of special advisor within the National Citibank of New York, and again is really instrumental in drawing up the plan for the U.S. occupation of Haiti, but is also instrumental in for Citibank's general Caribbean policy during this period. But I also think, if I may, that for me, a person who's been extremely important has been the African American writer and one time NAACP field coordinator, James Weldon Johnson, who wrote an extremely important series of essays in The Nation magazine, which really drew the American public to the question of the occupation, and actually challenged what was the dominant discourse among many Americans of the time, that the occupation was really a benevolent institution, and he started to really show the world the kind of rapacious acts of Farnham and of the Citibank, and I think his essay should really be reread by all historians. Or all people, let me say. And finally, I think a couple people who often get lost within the occupation, and I think this goes back to David's very important point about Haiti as being a kind of node, a kind of early node of kind of Black resistance in the interwar period. We have to remember the students who protested in October and November of 1929, the ones who basically refused who demanded more from the occupation authorities, and whose protests, and they were suppressed quite violently by the U.S. Marines, led to basically a general strike across the island that was joined by all classes of Haitians. And I think if I could say that what the most important or lost figure isn't an individual, I'd say that it's the Haitian masses as a whole, that the entire grouping of many unnamed and unheralded individuals who really ended the occupation. And I think if we look at an important book on Haiti, like C.L.R. James's Black Jacobins, Toussaint Louverture and the Haitian Revolution, while he singles out Toussaint Louverture as such an important figure in Haiti, he always keeps in mind that it was the Haitian masses that led to the revolution.
So I'd like to echo the James Weldon Johnson shout out, because I think he is really, really significant in terms of challenging the narrative about Haiti in the 1920s. Maybe another person who's kind of an unlikely kind of participant in the earlier story is Franklin Delano Roosevelt, right? We talk about Roosevelt as the president who kind of oversees the end of the occupation, but Roosevelt, as Assistant Secretary of the Navy, claimed to have written the Constitution, which had been imposed in the early 1920s. But the person I'd like to talk about is Charles Young, and Charles Young was the highest-ranking black officer in the U.S. Army, pretty much for the whole of his career. Right, he's one of only 3 African Americans to graduate from West Point during Reconstruction. And by the time he retired, he was forcibly retired from the Army at the rank of colonel in 1917, because to send him to Europe would have meant promotion to brigadier general, which would have meant command of white regiments. And so his career ended in a lot of controversy. But during that period from the 1890s to 1917, he was a giant of a figure in the black community in the U.S. And as a friend of W. Du Bois, he was very much an advocate of the idea of the talented tenth, and he played that role himself, right, as the leading figure in the U.S. military, a point of pride, and somebody who succeeded tremendously. And he was a very accomplished figure, and he succeeded against all the odds in terms of his military career. But in terms of Haiti, he plays a really interesting role, because in 1904 he was sent there as the first military attaché to Haiti, and the first African American to serve in the role of military attaché. And military attachés, there weren't many of them in the early 20th century. They were essentially sent out by the Military Intelligence Division to gather intelligence, right? More or less stated at the time, Young's role in going to Haiti was to gather intelligence which could be used by the U.S. military at a later point, right? And he wasn't just posted to Haiti, and I think this tells you something about the lack of understanding in Washington about the island of Hispaniola, right? That he was posted simultaneously to Haiti and Dominican Republic, and it became clear after a few weeks that this was an impossible job for one person, and so he was stationed in Port-au-Prince. But he went around the island, both Haiti and Dominican Republic. He rode it on horseback. He's one of the first people to map the island. He wrote a Creole dictionary. He wrote a massive report which was sent back to Washington. He won tremendous praise from his superiors for his detail and for his organization. His work would serve as some of the foundational material used by the occupation forces after 1915. In fact, Smedley Butler, talks about this, right? That these documents which Young created were key to the Marine success in navigating the island. So here you have an African American, somebody who's very much, conscious of the racial barriers presented against him in the U.S., is acting against it in the way he sees best, going to Haiti and helping to create the environment in which the U.S. will occupy the island, in which somebody like James Weldon Johnson later, and Du Bois, and both of whom Young was friends with. Young was active in the NAACP after he retired in 1917. So, but he never spoke out about what he saw, whether or not he saw his work in Haiti as having had a negative impact. Like a lot of African Americans, I think in 1904, Young held a view that he wanted places like Haiti and Liberia, where he also served as military attaché, to succeed. And as a product in many ways of American education and American society in the late 19th and early 20th century, he bought into the idea that the way for them to succeed was with U.S. assistance. And certainly Young speaks about this very clearly. I'd rather the United States, exerted power in Haiti and Liberia than France or Britain, because Young kind of implicitly trusts the U.S. to live up to its exceptionalism. I think all of that changes after the occupation. Young never talks about it, but I think for people like Young who would have held these views in 1904, and I think Du Bois too, right? Du Bois supported the idea of American loan to Liberia and so forth. Those views change after the occupation. In fact, Young is back in Liberia in 1919 and finds it virtually impossible to get kind of cooperation from Liberian officials that he was getting in 1912, largely because of the Haitian occupation. And he cites this in his letters back. So there is a kind of a sea change in African American opinion, I think, between, say, 1904 and 1915. And James Weldon Johnson is the tip of that spear. But there are others who really have, Haiti changes minds about U.S. foreign policy and African American support for that policy in places like the Caribbean.
All right, thank you both very much. And now we'll enter the Q&A session. So, Evelyn, do you want to field the questions?
Yes. Thank you so much. I wish we can have this conversation live in person. I think we invite you guys over because it's such a great conversation. I'm learning something every moment. I do have a question in the chat from Jill. In your opinion, what is driving U.S. interest in Haiti today? Like, since we talked about in the past, I guess they want to know today, right now, what is that?
I think the short answer that I would offer is, first of all, the idea of a labor force in Haiti that can be underpaid to work in sweatshops to create goods for North American markets. I mean, I think other scholars like Tamanisha John have pointed out that Haiti has the largest population in the region, and because of its proximity to the region, it provides strategically for certain corporate interests an amazing potential for cheap labor. Secondly, I think that we still don't know the extent that foreign interests are interested in both oil and mineral oil exploration around Haiti's coast and mineral exploration throughout the country. And then finally, I think the idea of parts of Haiti being turned into foreign controlled tourism resorts. So I think, again, in many ways, the primary interest is economic, though I think we could get into strategic and racial questions as well.
Okay, I think, I don't know, did you want to say anything about that, David?
I was just going to echo that point and say that the U.S. is still the hegemonic power in the region, right? The U.S. still sees itself as this area as its quote unquote backyard, right? Look at its policies towards say Cuba today, or Central America during the 1980s, or Venezuela even today. There's plenty of evidence that the United States is still determined to make sure that the governments of this region conform to its overriding.
Yes. The other question is also, do you think that engaging Kenya in Haiti's occupation today is strategic on the part of the U.S.? And if so, how? That's like a really interesting
Yeah, I think it's strategic and it's cynical. I mean, it's strategic in the sense that the U.S. is using the United Nations to protect its own troops from being on the ground in Haiti. It's creating this kind of diplomatic cover through the UN to enact its own interests. And someone like Linda Thomas Greenfield, who was basically a student of Madeleine Albright, is behind that kind of doctrine. And Madeleine Albright wrote extensively about the United Nations as an instrument of U.S. foreign policy. And I also think that a lot of the critiques, as we've said today, of U.S. foreign policy in the region have been around white supremacy and white paternalism. And so it makes sense to then have an occupation in blackface and say that it's actually a Pan-African move when it's cynical. Kenya, obviously, and the government of William Ruto has their own internal interests in sending troops over there, but I think those internal interests tie to financial interests because they're being paid their police officers and soldiers are being paid by the U.S.
All right, that's another topic. I'll invite you guys back for that one. But yeah, it's very cynical, putting a black face into a problem that's a white problem, I guess. Do any foreign nations owe reparation to Haiti? And if so, who and what do they owe them? That's a loaded one too.
Well, I mean, the French indemnity is where you start with that debate, right? I mean, basically, from the 1820s on, Haiti was paying, European, the French government, a good portion of its income, right, for much of its history, and that continues with the occupation, right? The U.S. occupation, when most of its revenues are sucked out of the country to pay for to service its debt. So, but where you start on the issue of
I would say a couple of things. First of all, not a nation, but I think the United Nations owes Haiti reparations for the terrible deaths that occurred on account of the cholera outbreak in 2020. They've never apologized. They've never talked about compensation. And I think that compensation doesn't necessarily have to be in a financial payment, but how come nobody is talking about building a kind of hydrological infrastructure for clean water for the entire republic? Why doesn't the UN build that instead of sending troops? I agree. I think that there is the question of the 1825 indemnity and France's payment. I also think that if we started to do more historical research, we would start to see that most likely places there's money in Philadelphia and New Orleans and New York dating from the 18th and 19th century that comes out of Haiti that the U.S. should probably pay. And I would also say that I wouldn't say this is reparations, but in terms of what do people owe Haiti, I'd say all Black people owe Haiti loyalty.
Wow, that's great. You're an honorary Haitian already, so that's a good thing. And one final question, what would it take for Haiti to truly become an independent from modern day colonization? Because it's like, it's free in name, but it's really haven't been free, since they declared their independence. But yeah, anyone.
Well, I would just say, Haiti historically has not been given the chance to demonstrate the kind of or the breathing space, basically, to develop the kind of institutions or patterns of government domestically that would, allow it to free itself from these international influences. It really, we've talked about the longevity of the Haitian Republic, but really, from 1825 on, there's been foreign influences exerting kind of a stifling, and of course during the occupation, dictatorial kind of influence over Haiti's development. So the easy answer would be say that turn back the clock and reverse some of these, episodes of the past. But certainly moving forward, I think Haiti has to be given an opportunity to operate without external influence, U.S. included.
Yeah, and I think what Haiti and I think a lot of other countries in the Caribbean would first need is a kind of forensic accounting of how independence has been undermined, and that's through corporations, that's through foreign organizations, that's through NGOs, sometimes that's through the church, and you can see that at all levels of government and the state. Haiti is being undermined by foreign powers. We need to know how and why, and from that point, rebuild the organizations of the state, rebuild the infrastructure of civil society, rebuild the infrastructure of health, maternal care, water, food, push for food sovereignty, monetary sovereignty. So it's a huge program. But I think the first thing we would have to do to even begin that process is to understand, what does it mean for Haiti to be under neo-colonial control or to be under occupation today? And until we actually understand what that means, Haiti won't be free.
Wow, I wish I can continue this for another hour. That's like a part two. I love that, because it's like, what does that mean? Because it's like there's a lot of external but internal things that are happening that you can't really pinpoint it with your natural eyes, right? And that's why I wanted to have this conversation, because when we got the documents from the Roger Farnham, I was like, wow, none of this stuff is actually in the books unless you go digging, because it's a real gloss over. Oh yeah, the U.S. occupation was to restore order to a nation that was Black run, and they did not know how to. They're savages and they can't, occupy, run themselves. But it has like a long plethora of nuances that does not really the average person doesn't know. So I think for me, I just want to summate it up, because I feel that as a Haitian American, I was very disappointed that I didn't know most of this information. And I went to school and I studied history, but again, I wasn't focused on the U.S. occupation. But just to talk about with my other friends, most people don't even know like the nuances of this, and it's so disheartening, because it's almost like it's like a fairy tale. Like, oh, that didn't really happen, or it's just with this. We weren't able to control ourselves, so we needed the outside influences and outside forces. So I think having these conversations is a step in the right direction. But I think what you said, Dr. Hudson, is that we need to know, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean today? What is U.S. occupation today? What does that mean? So I thank each and every one of you guys on the panel. I don't know if you guys have any last departing words that you would like to say. We can start off with Dr. Austin, who did an amazing job for moderating this panel. Do you want to say anything before we check out?
I just want to say it's always a pleasure. I've worked with you several times and been to the museum, and it's always a pleasure each time I'm invited to participate in something.
Thank you so much. We love having you as well. Dr. Kilroy?
Yeah, delighted to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. It was a very stimulating conversation. And as always, everyone learns stuff during these presentations. So I learned a lot. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. You're right down the street, so we'll get you. Okay, Dr. Hudson, when you coming back to the U.S., but go ahead.
Well, yeah, again, I just want to say I also learned a lot. I want to thank you for the invitation and thank all our audience for listening. And I do hope that I can come down to Miami to visit the museum and set my eyes on the Farnham papers. I'm really intrigued by what you found there. And please preserve and protect and share that archive, because I know it's important.
All righty. Well, thank you so much on the last day of Black History Month. But of course, it's not the last day. We celebrate Black history year round. And Black history is Haitian history, or Haitian history is Black history. And we are so grateful and honored that we have, again, our wonderful sponsors, the NEH, the National Endowment of Humanities. We have the Cultural Arts of the state of Florida. And we also have the African American Preservation Network. So we want to thank all of our sponsors for allowing these conversations to be had. And all the audience that participated, that could be doing anything right now for the last day of Black History Month. There's a lot of parties going on. but they chose to do the more edutainment thing, which give them more knowledge and understanding of who we are as the people. So thank you so much, you guys, and have a great rest of your day and continue celebrating Black History Month for the rest of the year. And again, we thank God for our 20th anniversary, so we're celebrating continuously. So go to our website, yay! Go to our website and look for more information on how you can support and be a part of what we're doing throughout the year. Thank you so much, you guys, and have a great evening.